Hello guys and girls, my name is Shane and this is the third episode to the series of how to become a game developer in 2021 using Unity Engine, knowing little to no information at all about game development. So let's get right into this. Last episode, I took you guys to the Unity Hub and I showed you an assortment of things. I showed you guys how to get new version types, how to access the Learners platform, and we also made our first project. Yes, you are finally a game developer. You have your first project ready, but it's not enough. You're probably looking at this screen and it's probably looking really scary. So this episode, I'm going to show you guys that none of this is very scary at all, and I'm going to explain almost everything you see on your screen right now so you know exactly what it is and exactly what to do with it. Now, the first thing you probably notice is that my setup looks a little different than yours. This is because you can actually move and drag around all of these little options to wherever you want to make you feel more comfortable. So let me set my screen back to what you guys have. And the way to do that is if we go to this top right where it says default, these are all the different types of Unity built screen views that you can pick. So I need to set this, even though it's on default, I've dragged some stuff around. So if I set it back to default, this is going to be your guys' window. This is probably what you're looking at. Now they do have some other built-in versions like tall mode, wide modes. You guys can also use these. It's not really going to affect the tutorial much, but I'm going to set it to default and show you guys what I prefer. Now what I prefer to do is I'm going to take this game view, I'm going to drag it down to the bottom. Okay, the game view is going to be what it actually looks like on your device when you're playing it. And then up where it says scene, I'm actually going to right click on scene. Oh no, I'm not. I lied. I'm going to click window and I'm going to click this package manager option. And I'm just going to take the top title of package manager and I'm going to drag it beside my scene. Now I'm going to explain to you guys what package manager is in a minute, so don't get too confused about that. Now let's start with the most basic and main functions. So this is the hierarchy. The hierarchy is where we actually store our game objects. These are the cabinets to our kitchen that stores our foods and our rices and everything like that. So right now we are storing our scene, our main camera, and our directional light. Now the scene is like the area that you are working with. I'm actually going to talk about this later because we'll talk about making multiple scenes and I'll show you guys why having multiple scenes is important, so don't worry about this at the moment. We have two objects inside of our scene. We have a main camera and we have a directional light. Now our main camera is what actually displays our game. So you need to have a camera in order for your game to show. If I turn my main camera off by clicking this little checkbox, you guys will see it will say display 1, no cameras rendering. This means there is no camera on, therefore you cannot display your game. So it is always important to have a main camera. Now for whatever reason, if you delete a camera, you can right click anywhere inside of this hierarchy and you can scroll down right to where it says camera, and there you go. Now if I turn off this camera, you see there's no issues. Now if you want to delete a game object, because we made one extra, if you click on it and you right click, go down to delete. You can also duplicate as well, but we're going to click delete. Now our directional light is what we use to actually light up 3D objects. You also need to have a directional light. So the main camera and the directional light comes standard in 3D environments. These are two things that you should always have. Now you're probably going to end up having multiple lights and multiple cameras, but we're going to start very simple and basic, so make sure you at least have one of each. Now I'm going to show you guys a little bit about how lighting in the camera actually works. So right now I just right clicked, went to 3D object, and I made a cube. So this is our very awesome cube. Let's pretend it is our player. If we double click on any of these objects, by the way, it'll bring us right to wherever they are located. So I double click the main camera and you're going to see a couple arrows. By the way, this top bar corner here, this is how you can actually navigate from different views. So I can look up, I can look to the right, whatever's best. And if you actually click this hand tool here on the top left, you can drag it around more easily if you want to look at it on different angles. But I'm just going to center it for now. So, now that we click this hand, we need to set it back to the move option, which allows us to move game objects. Now, I'm going to set the camera's position to 0, 0, 0. And I'm going to take this cube, and I'm also going to set it to 0, 0, 0. And now I'm going to double click the cube. If you see, we're going to have a couple arrows. We're going to have a green arrow, a red arrow, and a blue arrow. So a blue arrow is typically the where this object is facing arrow. For example, if we double click on our camera, and I'm going to set this back, so our camera is actually looking to the direction of the blue arrow. So if I take this cube and I move it up, we can now see the camera is facing in this direction and looking at the back of the cube. If I move the cube to the left, it goes to the left. If I move it to the right, it goes to the right. If I drag this behind our camera, we can't see. So imagine you're playing like a I don't know, a drama set over here, right? You guys are doing some improv, so the camera is actually going to display your game and show where you are in the world. Now you can do all sorts of things with your camera. You can rotate it, you can drag in and out the field of view. We will talk a lot about that later because this is actually a really good way to make your games more dynamic. But that is how the camera works. Now the directional light, this is what happens when you have no light. Nothing is going to be colored. So make sure your intensity is at 1 and make sure you have a directional light. There's loads of features we can do with lighting as well, but we will get into more complex videos about that. So I'm actually going to click on the cube, and now I'm going to right click and I'm going to delete it because I don't want it in our scene. Now we have this project panel at the bottom here. Now materials are colors that we can put onto 3D objects. Models are like custom-built 3D models that we have built for our game on outside platforms. A popular platform would be something like Blender, and you import them and they can get stored in here. And prefabs are game objects that you copy and paste multiple times. For example, if you're playing Call of Duty and you're playing their zombies game, most of their zombies look very similar. So what they will do is instead of making 1 million zombies, they will make one and they will store it inside of this prefab, and it will just copy and paste them every time they spawn it, so they don't actually have to make 100 zombies. Now we have our assets. Our assets is where you're actually putting your imported natures, right? So here we're making a 3D object, but down here is where we could store our models or our prefabs. This will make a lot more sense very, very soon, probably in the next video, so don't stress too much about it. And this is our folder where we store our scenes. If you guys want to make another folder, you right click, hit create, and you can create all sorts of things. You can create a C# script, you can create a prefab, a scene, material. So as you can see, this is where you actually initialize a project. But if you want to make a folder, it is right here, and you can call it whatever you want. So I'm going to call this UI because we will need this later on in our video series. So let's leave that there. Now packages, don't worry too much about this. This is where a lot of Unity's main background work goes into here. This is a more advanced thing as long as you guys have your Unity running and you have your Visual Studio, which you guys will have to download to program in Unity, then you will be fine. You don't really ever have to click on this packages folder until you get into some stuff like ads, but again, that's a future content. Now the inspector is how we actually determine characteristics of our object. So I'm going to give you an example. This main camera, without the camera, is actually just an empty game object named camera. And I'll show you what that means. So if we right click again on our hierarchy and hit create empty, as you see, this is just a name of an object, which we can name whatever we want. We can name this player if we want. And then it has a transform. And a transform is the 3D location positioning. So if we want to move it on the x-axis, if we want to move it on the y-axis, if we want to move it on the z-axis, right? So our left, right, up and down, and then obviously our rotation and our scaling. So this is how big the object will be. Now if you see, the main camera also has this exact same transform, but it has two other components on it. It has a camera and an audio listener. So we could also turn this player into a camera by literally clicking add component and put in camera. And look at that. So all these are, even our lights, are just empty objects with components that specify what that object is. Like, for example, our light is a light, and if I turn this off, it's really just an empty game object that does nothing. So components are really, really good for characterizing objects. Now again, we're going to delete this player component here, or I should say object, not a component, and turn this back on. So our inspector, you use it a lot to interact with your objects, to name them and change their features. It's really important, so get used to looking at this. Now, our game view, like I said, this is how we actually view and interact with our game. You can set up your styles here. So what we're going to do is actually set this to a portrait mode. So our first game is going to be a mobile Tycoon game. It's going to be very, very small, but you guys are going to, get the point and actually build a game really quickly. So we're going to want to set this up portrait size for a phone. So the way to do this is if you hit this plus button down here, you can write a name for whatever this is. So you could say mobile portrait. Now I just call it portrait HD because that's the mode I make it in. And for your width, set it to 1080, right? So your game view is going to be 1080 wide. And for your height, set 1920, and that's going to be 1920 high, and that is standard HD. And then when you click OK, it's actually going to make one of these down at the bottom here. So you see I've made multiple, I've actually done this video multiple times trying to get it right. So I have it in landscape HD, which is just reversed 1020 by 1920. Instead it's 1920 by 1080. And then there we go. Now we're in our portrait view. Now up here, our package manager, I'm actually going to explain this a little bit. So our package manager is really, really important. This is how we can import some extra packages like this for Unity. Now a really cool thing about this is Unity has an asset store where you can download lots of packages. For example, I was working on practicing some FPS packages, so I downloaded an FPS polygon package, which is like a first-person shooter, low poly game, and I can actually import everything, and I get this whole game, all of its scripts, and I can use it, I can play around with it, I can edit the scripts, I can do whatever I want. It's like a completed project. So you can store it down here, and you can open it up and use it whenever. So our package manager is going to become really important for downloading some free assets that Unity has to build our games, and this is actually where we're going to get our UI. For those of you who don't know, UI it stands for user interface, so it's what the user actually sees and interacts with. For example, if I right click and go to UI and click image, it's going to make a image. Ta-da! There we go. So this is a UI element. We can drag it around our screen, and this is what the user will actually see and interact with. So we'll be importing all sorts of stuff like special images and buttons, and you can even import characters, weapon models, you can import visual effects, you can import almost anything you want, even just custom coding for multiplayer networking, for save systems. So there's a very wide range of things that you can import. Now guys, I'm going to leave this video at this. I know it was a short one. I'm hoping that this whole area at least becomes less scary to you guys and a little bit more interesting and you want to learn more about it. So next video, we're actually going to get started on making our first game, which is super exciting. And I really hope you guys enjoy it. Again, if there's any issues with these videos or something that I missed that you guys want to know about, write me a message in the comments and I will either reply back or you might see that I sneak it in there somewhere in the next video. So thank you very much, guys. And until next time, we'll see you later.